Hello traders, welcome to your daily Forex market update for Friday the 20th of March, the last trading day of what's been an historical week in terms of Forex volatility. Now, if you have a look back in time, you'll note that a 400 pip move in the euro wasn't seen until we had the GFC. Now, because the prices were higher on a percentage basis, the recent moves were the highest in recorded history. And it's quite interesting as something from the Fed that was not a game changer in terms of a massive surprise and a huge shock to the market has actually created this. But it was from the back of such a huge volume of short euro positions were in the market. And when that happens, it's just skewed so one way that any small reaction to create a rebounce in the euro was going to be exacerbated, and a lot of stop loss orders were going to be hit. A lot of people scrambling that were short the euro, and that's exactly what happened. And then now we're seeing the US dollar strength come back into play, because ultimately that is the common sense path and the realistic story behind the data. So what's going to happen moving forward is going to be probably a little bit of consolidation before we see the US dollar strength actually take out some previous major support and resistance levels. So I'm looking to do some scalping and not play the major trends, but I always keep in the back of my mind the US dollar strength story is still very much there. They are still going to raise rates at some stage this year. Their economy is still the biggest and best performing economy of the developed world, with the UK economy not far behind. And that also leads me to be quite wary of the Great British Pound's recent falls. And there's going to be a bounce in that at some stage. However, considering that the pound versus the US dollar is the major trading pair, I don't think that's the pair that will have the most volatility, because ultimately the US economy is outperforming the pound. But before we get into some technicals and talk about price action and things like that, let's just have a look what we've got on the calendar tonight. It's all about the Canadian dollar. So the Canadian dollar will be in play, and it's going to be what's going to move the market, and it'll also have some minor impacts on the US dollar index as well, as they're such a close trading geographically, and their economies aren't too far apart. We will see some slight moves. Now, the US versus the CAD's going to be the trade, and also the CAD crosses. Depending on the data here, it's supposed to come out slightly weaker than expected. And if we do get that, I think that's a surprise to the downside. We will get the US dollar bulls jumping on, and we could get a nice move in the US dollar CAD. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Also following that, we do have a lot of Fed ministers coming out and doing a speech. There's actually 3 in total. But now these guys are going to be watched and focused on more than usual, and that's because people are still trying to get some more clarity of just what the hell happened at Janet Yellen's speech, and try to just get some additional answers leading into the weekend. And then we'll see next week the market hopefully push forward into some sort of harmonious direction. So that's all I've got coming up. I think that we will be looking at some consolidation, and let's have a quick look at the US dollar index chart. As you can see, we had the big falls. We're still within this uptrend, and I think this uptrend and these lows are going to be quite safe. And I don't think this is going to pull down and test it. We've had a bounce, but we could have a consolidation in this region here before we actually break above 100 and hold above it permanently and continue on this trend. So I am saying that ultimately I think the trend's going to continue, but tonight's probably not the night we're going to see the start of the next move like this. I think we could see a consolidation like we had through this period. Of how many days consolidation, that is the million-dollar question. But we always just remain patient, keep an eye on some technicals, keep an eye on the fundamentals. And over the weekend, I'll be studying the fundamentals coming up for the week ahead and see if there's something there that can initiate the US dollar bulls to come back into the game. Let's get over to the charts. We'll start off as I normally do with the US dollar versus the New Zealand. I'll zoom in here. And as you can see, we are still within this downtrend that I mentioned that we should remain so for a period of time. This major swing high is still intact. I think it's going to remain intact for a while. And the support at the double bottom is still quite firm. So these are the two very major levels that are going to need to be breached, and they're quite far apart. Now, if I actually grab my little measure here and tell you that there's 400 pips between the two, so there's a lot of price action and a lot of volatility to be had between these regions, and that's why I'll be looking to scalp, but bearing in mind the downtrend, bearing in mind the major resistance, the major support levels, I'll be playing with the markets inside here with the shorter time frames and looking to do some scalping, not getting too greedy and wanting to hand back any money. Now, the Australian dollar is very much a similar case, and you can see that we had a bounce. We tested the downtrend line, we didn't close above it. The next day we closed on it and then just pulled back down. I think we're going to get a short squeeze here. If I go to a 4-hourly chart, we might be able to. Now, see how we're making higher lows as well. I think that we're going to go into a consolidation pattern in here, and it's ultimately going to get squeezed until we break out to one of the sides. Now, the downside is obviously my favorite, giving the US dollar strength and the Australian dollar economy's weakness, and there's still opportunity for more rate cuts. Glenn Stevens had his luncheon today, and he did mention that it's still on the table for further rate cuts. So the market will be waiting and poised for any indication of when Australia will be looking to do that. There's still another month before we actually get any indication towards that happening. So we could consolidate for a little while, and it's going to be purely left up to the US dollar strength story to dictate the next direction. Now we're testing 77 cents, and we'll see what happens into the European session. The Great British Pound is one that's seen extraordinary movements as well. We had this massive movement here up to $1.51, and it looked like that at the time we were going to get above that elusive $1.50 and hold above it, but it wasn't meant to be because of the spurious nature of the move, and we're now trading, the US dollar has come back in and we're now trading back below it, and it's still looking very weak. Now, if I move this line down to the $1.50, which is about there, you'll see that it rejected it. It come up, tested it, rejected it, and now we're trading back below. If I go to a shorter time frame, we need to keep all that in mind. We do have a consolidation period, I think, in here, ignoring this downtrend pretty much now because that's not in play. We've seen some extraordinary movements in here, and the technicals are really not going to play a role in this period massively, but I've kept them in there just in case the market does have some sort of memory in terms of this trend, and we do get, say, a bounce up and we test this downtrend line and we start to see resistance. It could be a scalping maneuver to trade it back down again and things like that. So I'm definitely keeping an eye on that, and I think that we're going to see a consolidation between $1.50 and $1.47, and any breaks on either side of that will be a big indication of the next major trend. So once again, looking to scalp within this period. The euro versus the US has also stayed within the major downtrend. It came up, tested it perfectly, rejected it, and then now the US dollar strength story is kicked back in, and we're now trading back below. The major support at $1.04.50 is still holding up. A break of that will definitely indicate to the downside, but like all the other currency pairs that I've mentioned, there's no reason why this one should act as a lone soldier unless we get some very important information about Greece and the Eurozone come out, and then obviously this will react a little bit on its own and pricing in that information. But until then, I think we could start to consolidate. If I go into a shorter time frame, once again, you're starting to see here some higher lows. We've still got this major resistance. $1.06 has been support. $1.07 is being tested now. If broken above, they could open up into this area here, before the US dollar bulls ultimately come in and take out this trend line and start making some lower lows before the next move lower. So keep an eye on that. And I guess the story that I'm painting here is there's no major trends to jump in and pick up some major money. So we need to be poised, patient, and quite determined to pick up what we can while we can and not get a bit greedy and hand back any money. Now the US dollar CAD, now this is what's in play tonight. And we've seen a base through here and we had this uptrend and the market breached it, but however it's bounced back above it and we're trading healthily up in here. If we do get some weak data from the Canadian economy, and the US dollar bulls will ultimately come in and buy this up, and we should see prices start to attack previous highs. And I'm still a believer that we will get to $1.30 in the near-term future. So there could be some trading opportunities there for a particular trend, especially if we get some weak data out of the Canadian economy tonight. If we go to a 4-hourly chart, you're just looking for areas of support. There's a historical resistance level through here that was historical support. It could come support again. We could get the data out. We could break through $1.27 and continue higher, close the weekend on a positive US dollar note, and the market will remember the weak Canadian dollar coming into next week. The US dollar versus the Japanese yen is just a pure US index. Basically, if we have a look at it, it looks very similar to the US dollar index. And we've seen the big sell-off during the speech, this massive spinning top candle formation, which is a very significant support level now. And the market has rallied ever since. We've seen a bit of a stall at $1.21. It's nothing to be worried about. I think we're going to have a little bit of a pullback before we get some support and we move to the next moves higher. This downtrend line is also something I'm looking at, this resistance level. As soon as we start making some higher highs, the US dollar bulls will have taken reign and the long US dollar Jap position will be something to jump on. All right, that's it from me today, guys. Hopefully that gives you a bit of indication of where we're at, and you can do some scalping, pick up some money. Don't expect to make hundreds of pips or anything crazy like that, as we are going in a consolidation phase, moving into the weekend, and hopefully next week we can have another profitable week. All right, everybody enjoy your weekend. I'll be back again Monday. Until then, trade well.